We're going to introduce Rich Geer here as my co-host. He is a master artist. He was working for the state of Michigan in the museum, and I think we can talk about his experiences with being an artist and how you identify a master artist. So, welcome to Revolution Against Evolution. I'm your host, Doug Sharp.
And your co-host Rich Geer here as well. And this is an exciting subject for me, Doug.
Well, I knew this was something you could get into, right?
Yep. There's a lot of things I get into, but obviously I was the staff artist on the Michigan Historical Museum for 33 years. Did a lot of stuff. In fact, recently they've called me in as kind of consulting to do a project to help them out, and I'm pretty excited about it. It's kind of fun. I got to make some fake logs that look like real logs, and so these are some of the techniques. Over the years, you learn all kinds of different things. The museum was a wonderful place to work, and I enjoyed my time there. It was a joyous time. They gave me a lot of space and room to explore and try new techniques, different techniques. Of course, there were things I was already proficient at or used a lot. And then the computer age came in while I was in the middle there, and I had to learn how to do some of those things. So I don't know. What do we want to call what do we want to call the show? Do you have a title for the show at all?
I'm going to call it the master artist, and also referring to God in this case. How do we identify him, and how do we identify a master artist? If you take a painting, like you go into Pawn Stars and with this painting and say, I have a Monet here, and they bring in an expert. And the expert looks at this Monet, then this guy looks at it and he says, well, kind of looks like a Monet, but sort of dark for a Monet. I'm going to call in another expert. I know this other guy over here is really into this, and so he comes in and he takes a look at the brushwork, and he sees that there's in the brushwork smooth, confident strokes, and did demonstrate control and everything. But he said he looked on the back of the painting, and there was some bleed through, and a few other things. And it made it look was like this was a reproduction and not the real thing. And so there are things that you can use to figure out if this is the real thing, real deal or not. And I have a little thing I pulled up here. It says you look at for brushwork, make sure it's smooth and confident and consistent, and the event demonstrates control. And then it uses innovative composition, and it's balanced and harmonious arrangement of elements, often with innovation of approaches to space and perspective. Then another one is the use of color. You have subtle and sophisticated color shades, and the mastery of light and shadow and tonal transition. And then you have attention to detail, fine details that contribute to this uh, overall reaction, the realism or expressive part of it. It's sort of like you're painting in the theater up in the museum. You have those little camels go off in the distance and
Oh, yeah.
the detail, and everybody, when we point that out to them, they recognize, well, that's the work of a master. He knew what he was doing. And you look at your painting in the museum of the Native American scene, and there's something to see in every little corner of the painting. And you look way off in the distance, and they're playing Snow Snake, or they're got the details of Lake Michigan, and you have the details of all the different foliage and the leaves uh, and so you look down the foreground. There's a snake, and so there's something to see in every part of that painting, and you had to paint that in one quarter scale and have it blown up.
Oh,
So Part of the problem with that is that you blow up the flaws. But
Yeah,
in
when you
your
blow up,
case,
yeah, I was very nervous about that. I got to tell you when that happened. But I knew that I had to paint it very, very detailed. Because when you blow something up very large, it falls apart. And that's the thing when you're doing artwork. I guess we'll start with, to me, there's a whole idea of what, when this he's coming up with a bunch of parameters that are assumptions. And I
mhm,
think they're good assumptions, but not everybody has those same assumptions. We have obviously we have different kinds of aesthetics that declare what's beautiful and what isn't beautiful. And I think that's kind of what we're talking with art. There's artisanship, there's musician, there's all kinds of arts. We're thinking right now talking about the visual arts, but there's music, there's literature, there's dance, there's all kinds of things, and you in all of these areas you can always recognize when somebody is a master of what it is, the form in however they're trying to convey what they're trying to convey. But what I've noticed in recent years is something we've noticed for a long time. And I talked to this. Doug and I were talking about this before we started. Is there's a humanness in all good art. Okay, there's a humanness that shows the divine spark. There's also something when you use implements to convey your art, every little bit of it that makes it a little bit better looking or a little slicker looking can also be used to divorce you a little bit from the humanity of the creator. And we take trade-offs. We've done it for centuries. For instance, the most immediate and most direct human painting would be finger painting.
mhm,
But you're not going to get a Sistine ceiling with a finger paint. You're not going to get one. So we use brushes and we use tools. And so we decide but you can still see Michelangelo in every part and parcel of the Sistine ceiling. You could see it. Some of that stuff's getting a little bit more obscured. You went from finger painting to, let's say, brushes and really fine brushes. We were talking about a painting by Van Eyck Brothers. And it's unbelievable. There's a wedding. I can't. It's a painting. It's a wedding, and the guy's dressed in a fur coat, and the woman is obviously pregnant already. So so premarital sex apparently is not a new thing, Doug. It goes
mhm.
back to the beginning. Anyway, long and short of it, there's a mirror behind the two wedding, and it goes, and the painting is not very big to start with. It's maybe I was talking, I can't remember what it is. It's about 20 inches, maybe. It's very small. But then there's a mirror that's behind the two wedding partners, and it shows every detail in the room. These Dutch masters, some of them would paint with two hair brushes to get the detail like this. And it's just amazing because we had no photography at this time when this was painted. So these were incredible masters. As they had a they were mastered the stroke, the color, the composition. The composition is phenomenal. But and then in modern 20th century, or actually 1800s, you came up with photography. And photography came in. Originally, it was only black and white. It took hours. And in fact, people who painted portraits, hand painted portraits, were the same people that took photographic portraits. They were both a big art form. But as photography got easier, the hand painted portrait artists kind of separated from the photographic portrait artists. And that tool looks so slicker, but the point of it is some of the humanity, you can still get the vision, the eye, the composition, even the color scheme. That shows the human part of it, but you're losing a little bit of the actual physicality of the hand putting something to canvas or to paper or whatever. And of course, and then later on, you've come up with airbrush tools. And then I've used the tools, the internet, not the internet, but the Photoshop, Illustrator. These are all computer tools. I could take a black and white photograph, Doug, and turn it into a full color photograph. And it's amazing what you can do. But you're again divorcing a little bit of the humanity. And then now with AI, it's gone even all the way down. I'm not against AI. I'm just saying that you lose a little bit of humanity in all of it. And I think true artisanship, is never divorced from craftsmanship. Now, don't misunderstand me. People who do compose AI stuff can be true craftsmen. There are people that really come up with some really amazing things. the vision and the artistry are still there to some extent. You never totally lose it. But to me, art and craftsmanship are merged together to create art. Okay, there's a human spark that the Father Himself has put into all of us to some extent. Many of us, some of us, a little bit more in more overt. Like I was actually a fine artist and a visual artist to do stuff. Other people have creative endeavors for other ways they do it, whether it's engineering or whether they do original stuff. My point of it is we have that in us to create God's thoughts after him, so to speak. I'm butchering a quote from one of I think some scientist, but I don't remember who said it. I asked Doug about it earlier. I think it's a scientist who said, "Yeah, we think God's thoughts after him." Well, artists do the same thing, and there is a skill set and there is a mastery, and I think craftsmanship. If you divorce craftsmanship from the vision, you're losing a little bit of that divine spark. But that doesn't mean it's necessarily bad. It's just it's trade-offs we're making. Saying all of that is to say that, there's a million kinds of art forms out there, a million kinds of approaches to do things, and it all depends on what you really want. When I was creating stuff, Doug, for instance, people don't always care how you get to point A to point B. So sometimes you figure out tools to shortcut things. I'll give you an example. I would paint a picture, Doug, and I knew it was going to be blown up. And I knew that there's a detail in there. It was one thing I had a picture where these people were going into Fort Wilkins, and there were some canoes going up there, and they were really small. I knew when they blew that up, that was going to fall apart. You can't paint it that small in any well with a deadline. Of course, that's the other part of it too. When you're doing things with deadlines, you're constrained by time a little bit. So what I did was I painted a large, the same image, about 4 times bigger, scanned it in, dropped it in. I scanned the big picture and scanned the oversized one, put it in, and then did some other stuff with the computer. But again, I'm divorcing a little bit of the humanness, but the original painting is still there. You can see it. And it doesn't, and what's neat, you can blend it in really nice. So these tools are all really cool stuff to use. I'm not against any of them. I just that's the caveat. And let's go to another extreme of it, Doug. You mentioned earlier Jackson Pollock. You want to talk about that painting a little bit?
Yeah, Jackson Pollock, he liked to drip paint onto his paintings, and he
Used to call him Jack the Dripper.
Jack the Dripper. Jeez. Yeah, that's right. But he had a painting called Lavender Mist, and I think I got a copy of that somewhere. But it looks like you just drip paint on it, but I can see where people kind of liked it. But it was also an intent to introduce some randomness into his painting technique, and actually, he didn't succeed in that because what he did was he chose the colors of paint. He chose the method of doing the dripping on the painting. He didn't just spray it around the room. He actually aimed the paint at the painting. And so there was an element of creativity, even with the randomness that he was trying to portray.
Yeah, even the movement, Doug, is choreographed by him, how he was moving and how he was dripping. And what's interesting about a lot of these paintings, even the most abstract of paintings for the most part, if you take some of the things in nature and like zero in on them and look, in small, they almost look like an abstract painting in themselves. Like the wrinkle of a shirt sleeve, or looking at a sand on a beach or something that's been, or something in nature. They have an incredible look of randomness, which basically speaks to the point that we never fully, as human beings, are able to divorce ourselves completely from God's handiwork, that divine spark that He's put in us, because He's created us. We cannot do what He did. We cannot create ex nihilo. We cannot create out of nothing. All of us, in some respects, take our inspiration from what we know, what we've experienced, what we can see. And none of us, no matter how abstract you think you are, get away from that entirely. In fact, there was an artist named Mark Rothko, And his paintings were he was abstract expressionist. Unlike Pollock, who was the dripper, he did what they called field paintings, big like horizontal, but they look like landscapes. They look like landscapes, and we showed some of those Mark Rothko paintings, and they're very plain and they're not any detail of it, but they you look at them and they go, wow, that has a landscape feel to it, and they do. Okay, and you know the only thing that I would say to all of this is at the same time as we use tools, it can divorce us a little bit from the humanness from that God has put, that we wanted that creates a piece of art. But it also gets more when the more we try to divorce ourselves from the source of the creator, from the source, which is the creator, our art gets a little more fragmented, a little more nihilistic. We're not creating ex nihilo out of nothing. We're creating from something that's more nothingness. That's what a lot of stuff comes in there. And there's a lot of disillusionment. Like Mark Rothko and Jack Pollock, I think both committed suicide. Okay, they had a hopelessness in there, and they had this art, the spark, but they weren't connected to the source of creativity. And we talked about this a little earlier, Doug. And I love all I can share you some of all the different techniques that artists use. We'll maybe get into that a little bit, but when you divorce yourself from the Father is the part of the Trinity that gives gifts to everyone. The Father is the creator, He's the creator God, and He created everything in the physical universe through Jesus, through the word that was spoken in, and the Spirit executed it. But the Father, the scripture tells us, gives the rain to the just and the unjust. He gives gifts to saved and unsaved people.
Did you
Share the
struggle with
story.
that early on, Rich?
That's what I was going to say. Can I share that story? Because when
Yeah.
I first became a Christian, I struggled with the idea of whether I could still do artwork because I figured that was part of my old nature. Now, this is getting a little bit into the weeds. For those who are not Christians, the Bible tells us we need to crucify our old nature. Our old flesh has to be put under the cross. Who we were before in Christ is dead now. So I thought, well, wait, I did artwork before I was saved. We literally, so spiritually, we're kind of identifying Christ on the cross to die. And I thought I had to give up art. And at the same time, I got rejected from Michigan State. It was a clerical error. It turns out 7 years later, I find that out. But the point of it is, I thought, well, that happened at the same time. And then so I tried to stop doing artwork, but I had this compulsion in me to still do it, Doug. I wanted to continue to do it. And I thought, well, maybe I could paint Jesus pictures. And I sort of like tried to justify, and I couldn't. And it wasn't until several years later, I finally figured out that no, the Lord was telling me, I have given you that gift, irrespective of the fact that you were saved or not. I have that prerogative. Jesus gives his gifts only to the church. So does the Holy Spirit. But the Father gives his gifts to the just and the unjust. He gives his only begotten Son to the entire world, even though three-quarters of the world rejects him. He still gives them the power to choose him. Oh, that to me, what a gift. He gave his only son so that we could be restored with him forever. Well, it's the like manner with the creativity that the Father gives. He gives gifts. There are people that can speak, people who are smart engineers, people that are great musicians and artists and craftsmen and just whatever it is that they have. God gives these gifts, even though know they will never know Him fully because they reject the Son. That to me it breaks my heart, Doug. But as an artist who loves the Lord, that set me free. And my artwork, I will tell you this, became exponentially better when I recognized that whole thing. It became just quantum leaps better. A part of it's you're maturing, you're learning techniques, but part of it, I just think the Spirit it freed me up to create paintings and canvas and sculptures and all kinds of things that were wonderful, But I look at the art world and it's gone from the beautiful, even the medieval art, which was very hierarchical. It had a lot of Roman Catholic type things. You had a hierarchical, the people that were more important. There were a lot of Jesus paintings and stuff. In the Reformation, as good as it is, and I think it was wonderful, but they divorced visual arts because it had gone into idolatry. So they divorced the visual arts, and the arts became secularized. And over several hundred years, it became more and more divorced from the creator. And so you end up with all kinds of postmodern art, Mondrian theosophy, and abstract expressionism, which is basically postmodern. It was existentialist type of art, and there's a hopelessness in that. Art to me is supposed to reflect the joys of the creator. And the thing is, Doug, beauty. What this guy was describing, he was trying to describe some objective terms, but those objective terms have been obscured and obfuscated in a lot of respects. They don't always hold up because people are divorcing themselves from the creator. Look, Doug, when you look at a tree or a landscape or a sunset, you instinctively know this is a gorgeous thing. The colors, that article, Doug, you sent me, the sky is blue and the ground is primarily green for the most part. Yeah, you have desert areas, but generally when things come in like with accent colors or with reds and blue and or reds and yellows and orange, they pop at you. They're these accent colors, and we instinctively know there's a knowledge inside of us that there is such a thing as true beauty, and that gets to the crux of the issue, Doug. Why is it that beauty exists? Why do we? It's like the Declaration of Independence. We declare these truths to be self-evident. We're not talking about political rights here. We're talking about now there's things inside of us that recognize true truth. I know that's redundant and repetitive, but the point of it is, and beauty is one of those esoteric things that people can look at it, and we might have different flavors. Don't misunderstand me. You can have different techniques, but I find oftentimes many things are forced into people's consciousness, not because they're beauty, but they're trying to react against things that have been always recognized as beautiful. Okay. Always recognized as beautiful. And they're trying to react against that stuff. Okay.
It's
And
like
that's the law of nature.
It's like Paley's watchmaker argument, where
Yeah.
you are able to recognize a watch on the beach as being designed because you know what the true design looks like. I want to talk about my background here. I was in a town in Germany called Miltenberg, and if you and they have all these half timbered houses in this village that is very quaint and beautiful. And then there's a little passageway that you go through, and it takes you up a path which has all the ivy colored walls going up this path up the side of a mountain, and you get to the top of the mountain. There's a castle, and they've turned
Oh
this
boy.
castle into an art museum.
Oh man.
And so he would have gone nuts in this art museum, and so I had the chance to visit several different art museums in Europe while we were there, and there was one called the Albertina in Vienna, and it had Monets and Picassos and
Yep.
all of the famous artists that we know and familiar with. But I remember they showed a whole bunch of different plates, and these plates were Picasso's plates.
Really?
Yeah,
The
and so
originals?
the originals, yes.
Wow. Okay.
But I think Picasso, he had a technique to make something that was very simple into a design that was recognized like quite a bit by other people, and so he would do a little sketch and make prints of it and sell it off, and uh,
He
uh,
was quite the businessman.
yeah.
He knew how to make money.
Well, anyway, it was interesting to take a look at those uh, artists that were famous and enjoy the paintings that they had in these museums. I can share a few of those. But anyway, Rich, if you were given a painting by one of the masters, and you really didn't know who it was by, are there things that you could recognize in the painting that would help you identify who the master is?
Well, I would probably because I've taken a lot of art history, so
Mm.
especially when it comes to Western art. Now, if you deal with stuff like Japanese or Asian art, I would not be able. I could tell if it was a masterful artist. I could probably tell that because as the guy's criteria that you mentioned earlier, that you list off, there's a lot of reality and truth to that. Like the Chinese and the Japanese, very intricate stuff they would do, and you could tell that there's stuff that's especially if it's handcrafted. But like I say, one of my favorite German artists is Caspar David Friedrich. He was more of a romantic artist, kind of somber a little bit, but color, composition, yeah, you could look at the confidence in the brush strokes. All those are actually real things. I actually used to play with composition. As an artist, I would manipulate your eye. There are things I would, and good photographer does this as well. And you make your eye, most people, you take a shot. No, when I used to, especially back in the day when you couldn't just take an infinite amount of pictures, you composed your scenes so it gave you foreground and background and spatial, so you could tell what's going on. That's why a lot of people put people in it because that automatically gives you a center of focus and relatable object that you can identify with that helps you with the background and things like that. But yeah, with a painting, I tell people, I said, would you rather have a photographic portrait or a hand painted portrait if money wasn't the really issue and the artisanship, the likeness was going to be good? And I'd say 95, 98% of people would say, yeah, I'd rather have a painting because there's a human part that comes in there. And that's the part that I look at it. And it really seems esoteric, Doug. It really seems kind of Fuji Wooji a little bit. That's my words for kind of like I don't know, but there's a human element that is able to be related to. Most people say, well, that guy, the details are so good. I remember once saying, well, Rembrandt was so great because of the details. Rembrandt, he put details where they belong. But he had a lot of stuff that was very abstract looking. I mean, he just did stuff that was amazing. He got a lot of trouble, in fact, in one of his paintings, The Night Watch. Remember, it's a big long painting, but for short of it's called The Night Watch, because everybody in those days would pay equally for to have their portrait painted, right? But he was painting a dramatic scene and he'd have one guy's three-quarters of his face obscured by a guy pointing his arm out. You know what I'm saying? So his arm would be covered. And that guy got mad. He lost a lot of business because people were really mad at it. But in hindsight, that painting itself, nobody remembers the people hardly, except maybe the little figure in the bottom. She's kind of lit. It's almost like magic realism because she's not lit really uh, correctly, but she pops out. She's like this golden. They think it might be the Queen Wilhelmina or something. I don't know, some queen, but or royalty. But my point of it is that artwork sometimes doesn't get recognized right away as the master that it is. But good art will always stand the test of time. I had a guy years ago. He said to me, "Rich, I paid $50 for a starving artist painting. Did I get ripped off?" And I said, well, it's worth $50. It was a comparable, but there was no real feeling to it. It was painted by a real person. I think it could have been done by an assembly line process, but it wasn't really didn't have any real passion to the painting. It really did not. And I said a good landscape or portrait could cost you hundreds, even thousands of dollars. Money's not the issue here. I'm just saying that it's valuable more than you think it is. In America, we have this we have a hybrid combination. We have the hybrid where we have enough money to buy stuff, but not enough money to really buy good stuff. You know what I mean?
No,
That's what we have.
Cookie is working on a painting right now, and so
Is she?
I'm encouraging her in her creativity, and you'll have to show what you're doing and working on. The houseboat. Yeah, why don't you bring that in, Cookie? No. No, she doesn't want to bring her card with her.
That's the other last thought. No craftsmanship or worthy is not worthy. It's good to go and test the waters and let the juices flow wherever they may go. Yep.
See you next time on Revolution Against Evolution.